Thanks so much, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Brower, let me start with you, since I've been a member of the National Federation of Independent Business when I was practicing medicine in Casper, Wyoming. Our Casper Orthopedics was a proud member. And so there are a couple questions, things I'd like to talk with you about in terms of what's happening here. Plenty of talk on the numerous tax increases that are facing small businesses coming to 2025. Republicans have been very loud and clear that we're going to do everything that we can in our power to make sure these tax increases never happen. We've talked about the death tax, the expiration of the small business tax deduction, increased tax rates across the board that would impact small business owners. To go even further, though, Democrats seem to want to add to that uncertainty that is facing the country and threaten small business owners with a new supercharged death tax, increased capital gains rates, an additional 5% surtax on small business income. And I mean, this to me looks like a plan to strangle small businesses. So are you hearing from small businesses and the owners about these provisions, and what are they telling you about the 2025 expirations on some of these new tax hikes that proposals that are being threatened?
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for your NFIB membership. Really appreciate it. What we've heard from members, and there's so many different provisions out there, they're just generally aware a tax hike is coming, and what they have told us is about 66% of them will increase prices if this tax hike increases. About 44% will cancel or postpone planned capital investments, and then other businesses, there'll be other options, which will be they won't hire as many people, they potentially won't be able to increase benefits as they had planned. So it's going to have serious consequences for the small business sector.
So with the things I mentioned that you mentioned are inflation, increased prices, hiring fewer people, higher unemployment. So what impact are these tax proposals then going to have on our broader economy?
Yeah, I mean, they could have a significant impact just in the small business sector. If the 20% small business deduction expires, we would lose a potential growth of $750 billion over the first 10 years. Because if we make it permanent, that's where it's going to go, and we're going to lose potentially 1.2 million jobs that would have been there otherwise per year.
So I travel all around Wyoming, talk to farmers, ranchers, small business owners. On Labor Day, I was in the small town of Meeteetse, Wyoming, a town that's so small that the high school football team plays in the 6-man division because that's the many students as they have to be able to play. And one of the things that keeps them up at night is hearing this stuff about this stepped up basis. Many operations across Wyoming and small business are generational. The Biden-Harris administration has proposed this supercharged death tax. If my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have their way in 2025, they'd allow the current death tax exemption to expire. I mean, when I hear about this in Meeteetse, Wyoming, this has really gotten out a long way from Washington, for people worried about what Washington may do that's going to apply their freedoms, their life, their livelihood. Are you hearing the same thing from members of NFIB about keeping the current death tax exemption in place, as well as concerns about these new supercharged death tax, as well as this stepped-up basis?
Of course, if you get rid of stepped-up basis and you have an increase in the death tax, you're looking at, as you mentioned, a little bit of a double death tax. Our members who are nearing retirement, this is a critical issue for them. So nearing the end of life, critical issue they're very concerned about. The concern for the small business sector is often these small businesses are selling these businesses because they can't afford to pay these taxes to what often happen to be larger businesses who don't have the same footprint in these same small rural communities you just discussed.
Yeah, I mean, we have a group of the Centennial Ranch group. We have a celebration each year for those that have kept the ranch in the family for 100 years in Wyoming. And Wyoming has only been a state over a little over less than 140 years. So these are families that have been through drought, fire, terrible winters, all of it. And yet their biggest threat to continuing in the family is the federal government and what they're doing along those lines. So I appreciate your comments on that. Mr. Brunn, if I could ask you a question as well. There's been a lot of talk about people who, quote, avoid taxes. When you look at the data, instead of listening to the misleading rhetoric that we're hearing, it looks like high-income earners shoulder a massive amount of the tax burden in this country. It doesn't seem to be as much tax avoidance as we would be led to believe if you look at the headlines or listen to the people on the other side of the aisle. Recent data from the IRS says that we have a highly progressive tax rate and that the top half of income earners paid almost 98% of all federal income taxes. The bottom half of income earners pay about less than 3% of all taxes. You look at the top 1% of income earners, that's 26% of all the taxes. The Joint Committee on Taxation pamphlet published on behalf of the Finance Committee for this hearing also has some interesting statistics. What should unrealized gains not be considered as income? I mean, this to me makes no sense at all. You know, I would think that unrealized gains should not be considered of income. And Senator Langford talked about that a little earlier.
Yeah, so this is really a question of like what you mean when you talk about income. In this conversation, there's been terms like economic income thrown out or just general income. And for me, thinking about the future of the tax code and the direction we should be going, we should be thinking about things like consumed income, income that's available for you to use in your daily life and in your consumption. And leaning into unrealized capital gains is the exact opposite direction than moving towards something like a concept of consumed income. And it, you know, taxing unrealized capital gains would add additional complexities to the tax code, both on the compliance side and the administrative side, and a lot of uncertainty for taxpayers along the way.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.